So next we're going to move on to our largest team. So I'm going to watch while they get mic'd. But so first, let me get to the right slide. Awesome. So I now want to turn it over to our AKA team. So this is Allison Day, Carissa McKelvey, and Anil Dewan. And they will be talking to you about modern data systems for responsible pretrial risk assessment. And so just to explain the two mics, one is for the video and one is for the audio here. So that's why we're doing it that way. So thank you again.
Thanks, Betsy.
Oh, clicker. That's what I'm missing. Like, psh. Thanks everyone for coming. Which button is this? We're technologists here. I turned it off. Okay. Okay, so I'm Allison. I'm here with Anil and Carissa, my two teammates. We're here to talk about California pretrial data pipeline reform, and what that is basically how our background in software development can be used to fight mass incarceration. So we're in particular looking at the pretrial space. So what is pretrial incarceration? This is after people are arrested, they go to jail and they wait until their trial and until they're convicted. So we're addressing specifically populations of people that are held before ever being convicted of a crime, waiting weeks or months until their trial. So how big is this problem? Of the 2.3 million people that are incarcerated in the United States currently, we're looking at the orange piece of the pie, which is a substantial population of people held in jail. Looking a little bit closer, this percentage here, 462,000 people are being held in jail without having been convicted of a crime. So this is the pretrial space that we're looking to reform. So our belief is that data-driven insights can speed pretrial release. Our goal is to release more low-risk individuals being held pretrial. So what is low risk? Who is low risk? These are folks who have a low likelihood of reoffending if they're released back into the community while they await their trial, and they have a high likelihood to actually show up back in court. So how do we know people are low risk? This is where the data comes in. So data-based risk assessment and pretrial release outcomes analysis are what we can use to fuel faster pretrial release outcomes and make sure that we're making the right decision to release the right people back into the community. The current approach that California is using to do this, the state is funding individual counties to improve practices. But our plan is to modernize the pretrial data system to scale, and that means we're looking at the state level to implement ways to accurately, quickly, and transparently and justly release people pretrial. So our approach to do this was to perform case studies. We talked to a couple different California counties, and we were trying to figure out a solution to do this with a limited budget. So we interviewed a lot of people, both at the policy level, state officials, AI policy experts. We analyzed currently used software development practices at 4 commercial and nonprofit organizations that are currently working in the pretrial space, and we read a lot of different papers. In addition, we are all professionals working in the software development area. So the challenges that we found were that each county, in order to accurately predict who is low risk and who isn't, they need to be able to pull data from multiple criminal justice databases. They need to then, in order to analyze and report on outcomes, clean and aggregate that data, analyze data, create standard metrics, publish reports, and then send that standardized data for state-level analysis. Now, people working in pretrial are working for the probation department in most counties. People getting hired at probation departments are not necessarily data experts. These are folks that are trained to work with incarcerated people, do case management. They're law enforcement officials. They're not necessarily technologists. So California has 58 different counties. Each county has a separate system to implement all of these data needs. A lot of that data is missing. Counties lack the time and technical resources to do this. Just a few data points. 60% of arrest records are missing disposition information in California. This information is vital to performing these risk assessments to determine who's low risk and who's high risk. 80% of counties have 9 or fewer employees that are actually even dedicated to pretrial release, and most of those people are not, they're working on the ground, they're not working in data analysis. And then there's poor Del Norte County at the very north of California. This is a one-stop shop. There was one person working at their pretrial. This is a county of 27,000. We went back to paper, she said. The software management systems that were being used by probation were too complex, too slow to respond to their needs. They just went back to total manual processes. So this, in essence, is a mess. But we want to solve these problems. And what's at stake, again, is the liberty of individuals being held without having been convicted of a crime and the reduction of the jail population. So with that, I'll send it over to Anil. Oh.
Cool. Hi, everybody. So my name is Anil, so I'll talk about some of the recommendations, and then we'll pass it on to Carissa. So basically, based upon our research, we came up with 4 recommendations, right? And what we realized was that the need is so great at the county level, at the state level, and they are so far behind that really what they need to do is they need to learn how to crawl before they could even walk at this stage. So the first recommendation we have is that instead of going for typical government contracts, which are these large procurement efforts that run multiple years, cost millions of dollars, the county and the state really need to focus on building modular tools that are capable of living on top of existing systems. So what we really mean is that this is what typically happens, right? Let's rip out the whole system, let's spend millions of dollars over 3 to 5 years that never sees the light of day, to doing something like this, where you actually build modular systems that can live on existing systems, and then it gives you more flexibility as your needs grow to adapt the system. So for example, what are we really talking about here is that one, the Judicial Council should really look at the state of California's technology needs in the pretrial space as a whole, and not county by county, which is how they're currently approaching it. So the idea there is that they can group common systems together, and based upon that actually develop common solutions that could be shared across multiple counties. These modular tools sit on top of legacy systems instead of ripping out the legacy systems, which allows us to get started a lot quicker. It's a lot cheaper to implement, and it also allows for quicker updates and flexibility as the needs grow and change. And then lastly, as Allison mentioned, data is a really key part of this. This is why this is so important. And so to really have dashboards that are standardized across the state, standardized across the counties, to really help them be able to track the outcomes that they're trying to get. So the second recommendation is to partner with modern software development companies. So again, government, typically, I work for USDS, so we spend millions and billions of dollars on software, as Nicole also mentioned, that never see the light of day. And a lot of times the tendency is to go with large established enterprise companies, partially because they know the procurement processes, we know who the players are, they have a lock on the system, and the smaller players who actually have more innovation and better technologies get overlooked. Traditional enterprise software companies are large and slow. It takes them forever to deliver software. Usually it's out of date by the time it actually comes into the market, versus something like this, right? Like smaller companies that are small, nimble, agile, and actually have really powerful technologies to offer. These companies specialize in agile development, user-centered design. Their budgets run in the hundreds of thousands of dollars as opposed to the millions or billions of dollars. Some companies that we talked to during our research, California Policy Lab, so this is a nonprofit organization that is actually working with the city of San Francisco, and they have developed a dashboard that is used by the city of San Francisco to track pretrial outcomes. Right, so this is a company that is already doing this work. It's a small organization. And why are their dashboards not available across the state in different counties? Because nobody's really approached the problem that way. Here's another example of a company called Open Lattice. So they specialize in open source software. They're doing work in the criminal justice space in the state of California. There is also Recidiviz, which has currently criminal justice software, open source software running in 5 states in the United States, not in California. And their data solutions are actually powering needs for states for 10% of the incarcerated population in the United States. So these are companies that are trying to do the right thing. They specialize in open source software, but they just don't really know how to actually get into the procurement side of things. The Santa Clara County is an outlier. They've actually done their own work, which is kind of amazing. They built their own tool that is pretty, that should be open sourced and shared across the county. And then our third recommendation is to hire software engineers. Again, to Nicole's point, Decision makers tend to be administrators who don't understand technology a lot of times. And what we're saying is that you need to have technologists be at the table. They also need to be in the offices where they're actually building solutions, and you're not just outsourcing your tech talent to others. So basically hire tech talent internally, find self-starters who are able to work with legacy systems and come up with creative solutions and actually build them in-house, and focus on the public service mission. In our paper, we've offered 3 job descriptions to sort of help clarify what we mean by the kind of people that they should hire. Thank you.
I'm an expert in open source software, so I was offering in the paper a lot of recommendations. A lot of the people that we talked to, when we asked them about open source, they had no idea what we were talking about, or they were just like, I don't want to use open source, it's insecure, or something like this. So I think there's a lot of room to grow for folks thinking about open source software in production and how that can really increase and improve outcomes over time for government. So one of the things we recommend is defaulting to open. And this prevents legacy lock-in that kind of created this problem in the first place. So when we look at proprietary software and procurement processes, you then have an incentive being built by the companies to not allow you to modify and change your own software over time. So then you have to continue to stay with that company forever because they're the only ones that have ownership over that code. And so government needs to be able to own its own code and also share that code with the communities. And when the developer communities engage with the code, it will actually increase and have greater code integrity over time. And this has been proven over the past 10 years. And government at the federal level is already starting to move towards this. And so at the state level, we need to do that as well. And data security can be ensured through encryption, and only the code should be shared, not the data. So we can share metrics or the code and the dashboard code between counties, so counties can still have their own data stored locally. We're really just talking about the code here. So we kind of clarify those points in the paper as well. So we build modular tools, partner with modern companies, hire software engineers, and use open source software. So why now? Why are we talking about this? So the California Judicial Council was awarded $75 million in grants by the state, and they're giving these grants to 16 counties across California. They just announced this year. This will be an ongoing project for the next couple of years. 10% of that money is used for technology assistance, and it's being held by the Judicial Council exactly for this. So that's $7.5 million that the Judicial Council could use today to start this plan. And so we're going to be presenting our recommendations to the Judicial Council and connecting counties and the technologists at the Judicial Council to these modern software development shops. And we're hoping that they will use the job descriptions and hire the right people with this money. So that's all. Thank you very much.
I love this project, by the way. So I have a question about the data, because my assumption is that county to county, to the extent they're tracking data, they're probably doing it with different classifications and different taxonomy for the data. That strikes me as a huge hurdle, because this population is going to move from county to county, right? Like the people who actually need data about will be in different places when they get arrested. What's your view on, is that a state level necessary fix, or is there some other way to get to that problem?
There's actually other states. So we were talking about recidivism. Anil was talking about recidivism. They've already done this in other states, and California is actually a laggard in this. So California has a lot of opportunity to grow in terms of standardizing this stuff at the state level, but the Judicial Council has already created a lot of standards for this.
And also just to add, so the Judicial Council released a really elaborate data schema on all the data that they want the counties to have collected, but they didn't require them to do so, right? They're like, this is what we're aiming for. So we worked with recidivists to say, here is what the Judicial Council wants. What can your tool currently do, or what could it be expanded to accommodate? And they actually found that a lot of the data that they're collecting in the criminal justice space is already covered. So the incremental cost of actually making this increase and change is not that much, and then you can customize it to the individual counties once you have sort of the large schema created.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it's really excellent that we're focusing on these, I guess, prerequisites to having a data-informed society. But I also want to ask about the data, because it seems like to me that when you're building a process that is making the data pipeline like more thorough and stuff, you could also just be enabling and justifying like discriminatory practices in the past by like saying like this is what was in the data before, and like look, the data is here, this is what it supports. And particularly with like recidivism, like that you have, and pretrial assessment, you have a big problem where like you don't actually observe outcomes for people who you do choose to keep in detention, right? So that's something that like you can collect, you can standardize with all the data and put it in a computer. We also need to change practices in order to, figure out like who are we actually falsely putting in detention.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a, this approach is, we came to this problem looking at algorithmic risk assessment, and obviously there's an enormous amount of backlash against the bias that's inherent in the data sets that are being used to feed these risk assessment decisions. Our goal was sort of to do harm reduction on this. So many counties and so many jurisdictions across the country and California are already using these risk assessment tools. We wanted to create at least better data visibility so that these tools, the tool use, can be governed, and so we can actually look at outcomes, track outcomes, look at what the metrics are, fill in missing like holes in the data that's needed to inform these. And so I think by creating the tools and the modern kind of data analysis and visualization capacities, that can allow us to even do what you're suggesting, which is to take a look and make changes and do assessments for bias and assessments for these negative things. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm sorry we're going to have to do just one or two, but that's why we have a happy hour afterwards. You can ask them all your questions. So thank you so much, team. So now, yeah, sorry, one more.